So then, we are back with modern understandings of the time of the Second Tabernacle services were refined in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage. So then, we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find a layer of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste from many centuries. This understanding is precisely then on Yeshayahu then chapter 1:8 regarding then the returning of the holy cities, and also the Moadim explained in the 61st chapter of Yeshayahu the prophet. Most importantly at this point, as then the world is shifting itself from the 1,000 years without the holy cities, and then the world is shifting, and then the first city coming on the land of Cush as per the instructions of Yeshayahu, then we read this precise topic and we understand as far as governments, making a relation with the existing Greco-Roman copy. Let's then remove ourselves from government mixed with religion. So then, we find ourselves studying the instructions, and Shaliach Shaul, he was very known during his time because his objective was always related with his own people, indicating the Messiah was then the true person or the true prophet sent then by heaven and indicated by Moses or Moshe himself. But let's read what Shaliach Shaul has said, so we can make smarter of ourselves rather than stupid. Most people, they want to become smarter every day, and obviously diminishing stupidity is a very positive situation. As we then read this particular section of the instruction, we find ourselves then studying and becoming more acquainted. For instance, Romans, then you find, let every soul be subjected to the authorities of the kingdom to come government. So let's then understand what this means. When the Greco-Romans, they came up with their own translation, what was back then the objective? Simply manipulation of the people. This was the prime objective. How do we read the instruction? Very simply. Moses in the desert, he received the instructions for his people as they learned during 40 years of experience. They were secluded for 40 years. They were not walking for 40 years. The Greco-Roman translation is extremely wrong. How were they walking around for 40 years and not receiving the instructions and then practicing them? They were at times pitching camp in many places, but those were then sparingly done. Then they became stationary for quite some time. So then, let every soul be subjected to the authorities of the kingdom to come government. What does it mean? Firstly then, you find the Greco-Romans translating the original Megillas wrongly. Second, you don't mix this existing government with the kingdom to come government. The kingdom to come government was already practiced by Moses and his people in the desert. Then it was practiced in the promised land. Then the Messiah came and he brought the existing system in a Gentile world. Primary objective was then the gathering of the people of the Messiah, then explaining the spring feast was completed, and they were then functioning amongst themselves and forming holy cities as it was during the time of the desert. As we read this particular chapter in Romans, obviously you mind yourself then reminding what Moses did in the desert and the Messiah did for 1,000 years, and then you read, let every soul be subjected to the authorities of the kingdom to come government. What the Greco-Romans did, they removed the holy cities of the Messiah and they owned for themselves. That's what then we find governments mixing themselves with religion and becoming then a piece of junk. Let every soul, why did he say soul? In Hebrew culture or Eastern culture, 100% then are male driven. The males, they direct, kindly but sternly. So then, why Shaliach Shaul, being Hebrew of the Hebrews, as he said, why he said then soul? Because he was treating this particular section then in line with the prophecies of Daniel. Is he not talking regarding then the Gentiles? Otherwise he would be directing the authority of men or males. Let every soul be subjected. You understand then, men and women were coming to the presence of Shaliach Shaul asking questions. He otherwise would then teach them very directly then for males. But he didn't. As he was teaching this section for the Gentiles, he would point them around those people who were forming holy cities. At this time they were not yet. They were formed simply congregations. Later on, during the time of Yohanan, then he formed the first holy city. So then, should we be concerned with the existing government and the Creator? Never. Under absolutely any condition. Every government of this world is absolutely disgusting. There is no relation with the Creator in governments of this age. However, as we understand tabernacling and the path, then we understand what then the kingdom to come government expects from the other governments. And it starts with tabernacling. Moses in the desert, then later the Messiah came, completed the spring feast. He taught his people after he came from the dead for 12 months. And then from then on they formed the holy cities. And then later was 1,000 years without cities of the Messiah. And then we are during the time of the restoring of these cities. So then Shaliach Shaul has said, let every soul be subjected to the authorities of the kingdom to come government. The Greco-Roman translation has scoundrelized it. They state, Let every soul be subjected to the authorities of the government. What government? The kingdom to come government. The Creator himself will teach other nations how his government must be in the future. You can be sure of it. It is the best government ever. So then, should we mix religion of any kind with governments? Absolutely not. No religion mixed with governments. Religion is personal. So then, what else Shaliach Shaul has said? For there is no authority from Elohim that must have then another kind of authority above. In other words, there is not an authority set in this world that can supersede then the authority established by Elohim. This truly is very straightforward. Even if the first section was scoundrelized, you can catch on the second. So the hands of the Creator is everywhere. The more people try to change it, scoundrelize, the more obvious it becomes. Then, for there is no authority, not from Elohim, because the authorities set at the existing moment are established by Elohim himself. He therefore who opposes this authority established by Elohim obviously will receive judgment. If they receive, then they are judged. Plain and simple. So governments must be always aware of tabernacling. Tabernacling is the objective. Now, does this then prevent you from going to your congregation? No. But when you study tabernacling, your understanding of congregation begins then a huge change. You are no longer driven by fables and lies and cheats and wrong translations. You begin to clear your mind from wrong pictures. Only because you have learned in a certain way from the Greco-Roman translation, it does not make it true. You can learn it from a certain way from the Greco-Roman translation, yet you can become a scoundrel. Though you were honest, yet you are a scoundrel. So then, the best way of not being a scoundrel is knowing the truth, and then practicing it for a bit, and then showing somebody else. Then form a true congregation. So when Shaliach Shaul was making these event presentable, he made these in front of the people. Why? Because the Romans at the time, they were very acquainted with the holy instructions. Even Shaliach Shaul himself, he was talking extremely positively of Rome. They were true people dedicated to those instructions of the Hebrews at first. So then, as we read, you are reading from Shaliach Shaul extremely contented by the performance of those congregations in Rome. Then later we must identify some of these areas, why they were so famous in many areas of the empire. So please stay tuned, because later we must evaluate these further. And then sections we find then in acts. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.